In this video, we will walk through an overview of creating a custom plugin for Unmanic. Plugin system in Unmanic allows for additional functionality beyond the scope of the main project, which is to transcode media files. A number of people have requested additional features to be carried out, such as notifying third-party applications on completion of tasks, or carrying out more advanced file manipulation using the ffmpeg command that may be beyond what the basic settings of Unmanic is able to provide. For this reason, I created the plugin system so that myself and anyone really may extend Unmanic with these sorts of additional features. If you want to create a plugin, the best place to get started is on the Unmanic documentation page. I've got it up here. That's docs.unmanic.app. Click on here, you'll see that there's a section for plugins, which will give you an overview of what a plugin is and the types of plugins that you can create. And then we'll also walk you through actually creating a plugin. I'm going to get started from the command line. For this demonstration, I'm going to use VS Code, and I'm going to open a terminal. In order to carry out the steps that I'll be doing here, you first need to have Unmanic installed on your PC. I've got Unmanic installed using Python pip. However, you're able to run the commands that I'll be demonstrating here from within the official Unmanic Docker container also. Once you've installed Unmanic, you'll be able to access the Unmanic command. This is usually used for starting the Unmanic service, which will then allow you to access the web interface. At the moment, I do not have that running. If I was to just type Unmanic and click enter, it'll start the web interface and it will now be running. I've already come and pre-configured this with it pointing to my temporary library. One worker disable the watcher and then increase the library scan to a ridiculous amount so that it's not constantly looking at my library. When I'm doing development work, I like to have a development library so that things are isolated, and also have a debugging enabled. What we're going to do as a demonstration is we're going to create a plugin for notifying Plex when a task is complete. I've got a test Plex server here which has a single movie in it, and at the moment we've got a video file sitting in there which is an MKV. What we're going to do is we're going to have Unmanic replace or remux this file to an MP4, and it's not going to touch the video or audio stream, so I'm going to have these two disabled, and obviously don't need any advanced features. To create a plugin, open a new terminal. I'm going to leave Unmanic the service running here in this other terminal, and I'm going to create a new one. From the terminal, type unmanic --help, and you'll be able to see the various arguments that you're able to pass through to the unmanic command. The one that we want to use here is manage plugins. So if we go unmanic, and click enter, we'll be given a menu list here. I currently don't have any plugins installed, so these first two options, to test installed plugins and list installed plugins, will not actually do anything. If we click list installed plugins, you'll see that it just does nothing. So the only option that's really available to us at the moment in this list is create new plugin. Let's do that. This is going to be a Plex notification, so let's call it something basic like notify Plex, and name it also the same. There are 4 different kinds of plugin runners at the time of making this video. If you want more information on those and more up-to-date information of what plugin runners are available, come to the this page here that's given in the terminal, and you'll be able to see a breakdown of what each plugin runner does. For the Plex notification, we want to run a post-processor marking task success or failure. This is run at the very end of the post-processor, and will be the plugin runner will be given a dictionary of information based on whether or not the overall task conversion was successful or not. So let's click on this, and what you'll be given is a notification saying that plugin was created. And as you can see up here, I'm already in that directory, and it has created a folder, a directory with notify_plex. Now if we were to list install plugins, you'll see that it is there, and likewise if we come over to this side and refresh, you'll see that the notify_plex plugin is now in there and disabled. So let's jump into this. What it's generated is four files, an info JSON, and in this you can then further populate it with any missing information. Such as that. The tags section here is useful for searching, so at the moment we don't have any tags. If you were to do a search in here, it will be able to filter the list of plugins down based on not only the plugin name, but also the tags. So it's a useful way to categorizing your plugins so that people can find them easily. So put in something into the tags that is useful for the plugin that you're creating. In order for this, you'll notice that when you click on list install plugins down here again, the author description and tags haven't actually been populated. And the reason for that is this data is inside the Unmanic database, and we've only edited the JSON file. The Unmanic database is populated usually when the plugin is installed, and we're currently developing it on a live sort of system. So in order for the changes that we've just made to the info JSON to become visible, we need to reload the plugin from disk. Now if we were to refresh this and also list the installed plugins, you'll see that it has given us the author and the tags. The next file that has been created inside this directory is the plugin Python file, and this includes 2 main things: a settings class, we'll come back to that, and a function, which is the plugin runner. If we go back to the documentation, as I mentioned we were doing this, you'll see that the function that gets created is a on post-processor task results. A plugin runner function is always given data, and it is the basic idea of a plugin runner function is to return the data that is given. So here we are given a dictionary, and in this dictionary we'll have task processing success, which is a boolean, true or false, whether or not the task was processed successfully. The file move process success is whether or not all post-processing movement tasks completed successfully. So that's things like copying files or moving and replacing files. If there was an error, there would be this is a boolean, and this will be false. The destination files, so another post-processor plugin allows you to generate multiple file movements, so you could move the file into multiple places. This will be a list of destination files that were generated. And then finally the source data, the original files file probe that gives you a breakdown of the original codec and container of the source file. So what we can do with this data is we can manipulate it and then return that back. So if we were to deal with a worker runner, we would want to return certain information regarding the ffmpeg command. With this post-processed task results, we actually don't care about none of this information is important to be returned for the plugin runner to be a success. However, it will do a check on the return data to make sure that it is of the correct type. I'll demonstrate that if I created, if I overwrite this particular thing, which should be a boolean. If I make that a string, and then we run this test installed plugins. Oh, helps if you spell it correctly. You'll see that we'll get a failure here where it says that it expected a bool but got a string. So keep that in mind when you're testing or when you're developing plugins, that you should run the tests to make sure that your plugin will actually function correctly. Now, the settings class allows us to generate user configurable settings. If we go into Unmanic and we click on configure, at the moment there is no settings for this plugin, so we don't have a settings option, which would normally be down here. Let's create some settings. For this particular plugin, we're going to want to connect to Plex URL. Let's set a default of local hosts port 32400. If we save that now and come back down and test our installed plugins, you'll see that it actually reads that and the default value. And over on the web interface now, if we refresh this and click on configure, it's now generated a text input that we're able to modify. So we can go blah, click save, come back here, test, and you'll see that that setting that I've input has overwritten. What it's done is it's generated a settings.json file within your Plex directory, and it's exported the dictionary as a JSON object. So whenever settings are saved, this is where they are saved to, and this JSON object will overwrite whatever the defaults are that are in here. Let's add a few more settings. We're going to need a Plex token. I'm not going to set a default value for this one. It's going to be a required thing, and I think we'll also have a question here. Notify on task failure, question mark. This will be a boolean value, so by default we will call that false. We don't want to notify Plex when a task has failed. Let's save that now. If we reload the web browser, click on here. In fact, we probably didn't need a reload. Let's change this back to localhost, because that's going to be our actual value, and save that. Now if we go here, you'll see that it's populated with the new items. Right, let's create a Plex notification plugin. I'm going to use a already built Python library. Now, a Unmanic plugin is fully extensible. It is its own Python module, effectively, that is called upon at set stages through Unmanic. You can from here call and import any Python module that you wish, and I'm going to demonstrate that here. So what I want to do is I'm going to use this guy. we're going to call, basically if you want to import a Python module, you'll see in your directory there will already be a requirements text. Just add it to that, and it's always good practice to specify a version. Now that we've modified this file, in order for that to come into effect for our actual thing, we need to reload the plugin from disk again, and what it will do is it'll install those modules. It installs the modules into a site packages directory within your plugin. This is normally then you don't need to commit this when you're adding it to your repository. However, when the plugin is built and zipped up, it will also build this directory and zip it up with the thing. So when you deploy a plugin to your repository, or the plugin zip file will contain everything that that plugin needs in order to run. So now that we've got the Plex API module installed, let's import it. And I am not good with documentation, so let's have a look at some documentation. Now, the first thing we're going to do is import the required parts. So we're going to generate a Plex server. I like to separate my my runner function from the actual logic. So let's create a new function here for updating Plex. We're going to need two variables passed into this. We need the Plex URL and we need the Plex token. Down here, in order to get those two things, we're going to have to read them from our settings class. The settings class can be called directly from here. In order to fetch the settings, you can't just grab the settings dictionary from here. That won't work because then we're not going to get the updated settings that are in this file. So what we need to do is the plugin settings module contains some built-in functions, and these are documented under the plugin settings page here. You've got basically two. You've got get settings and set settings. We just want to get these three settings, so let's do that here. Pass it through the name of the this here. Make sure you get it exactly correct because, yep, so we're basically calling that dictionary and we'll get it. Let's do the same for the Plex token. And also let's get the notify on task success or failure. We'll put this up here because what we're going to do is check prior to. In fact, we'll do that later. Then we want to call an update to Plex. Plex URL, Plex token, and then return the data. Like I mentioned before, none of the data actually matters in this case. All we're taking is we will check to see whether the task processing was successful or not, and then check it against that. We'll do that later. But we're going to run through this, make a call to Plex to update itself, and then return back to the main Unmanic process. So up here in this function, we need to copy in this stuff here. The Plex URL will be that. In fact, we don't need that. Let's get rid of that. And then we want to make a to the Plex library. To do that, we want to use this guy. So we want to call Plex library update. Done. That's it. Now that we've done this, we'll come back to this part. Now that we've done this, whenever a task is complete, it'll come into here, it'll execute this. We will have configured the Plex URL and the Plex token, and then we'll run this function that updates the our Plex server. So let's take a look at that. Over here, we're going to need to configure our Plex stuff. My Plex server will be running on localhost, but I do need to get the Plex token. To do that, just click on here, get info, UXML. Right at the end here is a token. Pop that in there, click save, close. Then the other thing as well, at the moment plugins are always installed or disabled, so we click on this, enable the plugin. Now it is going to be available to us when it next processes a task. At the moment, the file that we want to do is already an MKV, so let's set it so that it will remux it to an MP4. And then click scan. It's probably good practice to test the plugin to make sure that it actually works. Why did that fail? I'll come back to that. So the file completed correctly, and over here, if we look at this again, you'll see that it has worked. Why did that fail? Let's quit. There must have been something in its memory. Doesn't normally do that. Alright, let's finish this off. We also want to add a task success or failure. So to do this, if data get task processing success and not plugin settings get setting So what this will do is if our overall task processing was not successful, and we've got it configured so that this will be a false, so that the notify on task failure is a false, then straight away we're going to bang out. We're not going to bother sending Plex a notification. Sorry. Saying not. So if the task processing was not successful and this notify task failure is not set, then return. Let's try that one more time. Alright, currently reporting on task failure. Let's turn that back off. Save, close settings. Let's convert it back into a MP4. Click submit. False, good. Our file is currently an MKV. Let's run a library scan. It'll pick it up, convert it to MP4. In fact, well, we can see here that it is doing a library scan. There we go. And that's that. If you want to then, if you had created this plugin and you wanted it to be published on the official plugin repository, come over to the my Unmanic GitHub page and open a pull request. And that's that.